Really, it comes down to we just don't want to stop doing what we're doing. We really don't want to stop eating meat. And we will make the dumbest arguments, the dumbest excuses in order to continue doing that. So a lot of you have asked me to check out Earthling Ed over the past few months or so. And I still haven't. I don't know why. But then I got a couple emails from my dad actually a few days ago where he was sharing some Earthling Ed videos and was like, hey, I like this guy. So I figured, hey, if my dad likes him, he's probably got some good stuff. Anyway, I went to his channel and I saw this recent video, Student Confronts Vegan about Indigenous Culture. Oh no. So I'm very intrigued. I'm very interested to see how this goes, what he has to say about this, how he does in like a debate scenario. It looks like he does lots of debates with meat eaters about veganism. If my dad likes this stuff, I'm assuming he's very calm and reasonable and not, I don't know, obnoxious. And I guess I should say I've talked a little bit about the indigenous culture stuff. People who use indigenous hunting as an excuse themselves not to go vegan, even though they are not indigenous and don't have any barriers to going vegan, and how I find that pretty gross. But anyway, let's check it out.
I see everything that has a soul. I try to treat every single thing with respect.
But you're appropriating indigenous culture to justify arbitrarily harming.
I'm appreciating indigenous culture.
But hey Q, nice to meet you. My name's Ed, and today I'm at the University of Dallas with a banner that says, why aren't you vegan yet? You've been listening to a conversation I've just been having.
Yes.
And it seems like you have some questions or some ideas or thoughts. So let me know what you think.
So my first question for you is, what is your opinion on the native tribes such as the Inuit who live up in Alaska, who don't have easy access to these fresh produce that you're wanting them to eat and instead rely on the animals they hunt?
Yeah.
So first off, she seems very upset, I think, from the get-go. The way she's talking and breathing and speaking so loudly, she's almost like yelling at him. She seems kind of angry, which is not a good way to go into a debate. I mean, really, this, I assume, is supposed to be a conversation. It's not conducive to learning to go into a conversation like that immediately angry. It seems like immediately assuming kind of what his beliefs are and what he's going to say. So yeah, very off-putting from the beginning, I have to say.
What we do to animals is an issue of necessity. This question of veganism comes down to the options and choices that we have. So there are obviously people in the world who don't have the availability or the access to be plant-based or to be vegan, who are maybe in tribes and in indigenous communities where they don't have the access that you and I have, where we live with the means that we have. And so as a consequence of that, the morality of that situation is very different, because they hunt animals and eat animals out of necessity. But the point of me being here with the banner about why aren't you vegan yet is to draw on the fact that it's about you and I and the situation that we have and the means that we have, which is why it becomes a moral issue for us.
Very well said. We're not talking to people who are starving. We're not talking to people who have limited access to food. We're talking to people like ourselves who live in very luxurious countries by comparison, or have the means, have the money, and have the accessibility to go vegan. That's who he's speaking to when he's asking, what his banner said, why aren't you vegan yet? Clearly, that's who he's talking to. He's not talking to people who don't have choices.
I mean, you talk about, us like we are not part of these indigenous tribes. I mean, these indigenous tribes, yes, they live, out remote, away from, civilization, but many of them, they don't see veganism as like, they don't want veganism.
How does she know this? Just curious. Why are you speaking for, it makes me very uncomfortable.
I don't want to be vegan.
And why don't you want to be vegan?
Because one, I I'm a neurotic, which means I'm very sensitive to certain things. So I already am, picky about what I eat. And so trying to find like a substitute for the nutrients that I need is very risky. So eating meat that I know, meat that I understand, it helps me that way.
And that might be true. Certainly, I've talked about a lot on this channel. I have videos on people who can't be vegan, can't be vegetarian. And sometimes that's because of health issues, digestive issues, or even just kind of picky issues, right? I mean, there are people with severe food aversion issues where it is impossible for them to be vegan and get the nutrients they need. And also those recovering from eating disorders, particularly severe eating disorders, often does not make sense to try to adopt veganism or restrict food when restricting food has been a huge problem for them in the past.
With these indigenous tribes, they because you have to understand, veganism is very much a white colonized thought. It very much is.
Well, people say that, but then also people say that when you look at the roots of non-harming animals for diets, it's deep-rooted in places like Hindu cultures and Jainist cultures.
So for those who are interested in the history of vegetarianism and the history of veganism, I highly recommend, it's a podcast series, I believe. I think it's called History of Vegetarianism, and it's very good. It's very well done and very detailed, so I highly recommend that. But anyone who says that veganism is a white thing or a white colonized, what did she say?
White colonized thought.
Oh, it's so embarrassing. It's just a lack of history. It's a lack of knowledge. It's people who believe that veganism started, 10 years ago in California. Just because many of the YouTubers are white women does not mean that they started veganism. Goodness. And even if it were started 10 years ago in California by white people, that doesn't inherently make it a bad idea. An idea is good or bad on its own merits, regardless who is promoting it, who believes it. It's not us. It's certainly not me. I'm not the one saying veganism is only for white people. I feel like it's people like her who are saying, no, veganism is for white people. Ew, gross. I feel like if I were not white, if I were a minority of any kind and I were vegan, I think I would find that fairly offensive. I don't know.
I'm not saying vegan is bad. Veganism is not bad. If you want to be vegan, be vegan.
Yeah, cool.
But when it comes to pressuring other people who don't want this and who have different beliefs.
So yes, people have different beliefs and some beliefs are wrong. Just because someone doesn't want to do something doesn't mean they're right and they're not wanting to do something, or they're wanting to do something, wanting to continue to eat meat. I don't believe in this oh, well, I respect your decision. No, I don't. I think it's a bad decision if you just want to eat meat because you like the taste and you want to eat it. No, I think that's bad. Does that mean I think you're an awful, terrible, immoral person? No, we all are immoral to varying degrees. And I've acknowledged many times on this channel that it can be very difficult to stay vegan. It's something that we do multiple times a day, and many of us eat animal products every meal multiple times a day, so it can be a hard thing to change. And there's also social pressures around that as well. There are a lot of horror stories of people trying to go vegan and being ridiculed or worse by their family and friends. Basically, I think we should be compassionate and not just be assholes to everyone who's not vegan, because it's really crappy and it's not recognizing our own faults. It's not effective also. But that doesn't mean we just say, oh, you do you, everyone has different beliefs. No, some beliefs are very wrong and very harmful, and eating animals is one of those. For most people, again, if you're eating meat to survive, it's a different thing.
For instance, are you aware of the view of cosmocentrism?
No, you explain it to me.
So can I just say how lovely and calm he is and really seems to be listening? It's like I said at the beginning, she, I think, pretty clearly has gone into this conversation not really wanting to have a conversation, but just wanting to say what she believes, and is already starting out upset and probably angry. On the other hand, he seems to really be listening, and he's calm, I think, because he's comfortable in his own beliefs and because he likes talking to people and actually wants to have a conversation, which is just really nice, and it makes him a perfect person for something like this.
Cosmocentrism is a worldwide view believed by many of indigenous tribes in which everything is equal to each other. Me, you, the trees, the grass, the water, the rocks, the animals are all equal to each other.
And that's wrong. Lots of people have beliefs. Lots of different cultures have beliefs, have ideas that are held by most of the people who adopt that culture, who grow up in that culture. It doesn't mean that they're right because it's a belief held by a different culture. This is essentially called cultural relativism. You see this a lot in cultural anthropology. You see this a lot among the kind of woker crowd. They are very, very hesitant to criticize something that other people believe, that people who aren't white basically believe. Some people even believe that there are like other forms of knowledge, other forms of knowing. No, it's bullshit. A person and a tree are not equal. A cow and a rock are not equal. And I think that's pretty clear to most people. Why? I don't think I really have to explain the relevant differences between a cow and a rock. Rocks cannot feel things. They cannot experience things. You can smash up a rock. It doesn't matter how many times you smash it. That rock is not going to be alive and feel the smashing. I think it's coming from a place of compassion, wanting to respect other people's beliefs. You can be respectful without just saying, oh, it's all fine and it's all just you do you and all of our beliefs are the same. No, some beliefs are really stupid. And believing that rocks and people are equal, it's really stupid. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's going to say that in a much nicer way than I am, or I don't know. I don't know how he's going to respond. I should probably watch the video.
They hunt elk and they hunt moose, but they don't just hunt them. They respect the animal. They take everything from the animal and they thank the animal.
The Neil deGrasse Tyson video I did, that's basically what he ends up saying, which is just very, he's a very smart man to hear someone basically say that, like, he respects all the things, including the trees. It's so goofy. We make really silly arguments when really it comes down to we just don't want to stop doing what we're doing. We really don't want to stop eating meat. And we will make the dumbest arguments, the dumbest excuses in order to continue doing that. This whole idea that if you respect the animal, then it's okay. The animal doesn't know if you respect it or not. A deer doesn't know if you respect her or not before you shoot her in the face. Either way, you're shooting her in the face. You're ending her life. It's ultimately just a very selfish thing, I think. It's to make you feel better about what you're doing, because the deer does not understand that. Does not know the difference. To be clear, I don't think traditionally this was selfish. I don't think it came from a selfish place. I think if anything, it probably came from a place of compassion. When you have to do something like this, like killing creatures out of necessity, most people aren't sadists. They're not getting a kick out of that. They're probably not enjoying it very much at all. So it makes sense to create these myths, to create these beliefs that, well, actually, this is all part of nature, the natural balance, and it's good, and the animals understand what we're doing and they accept it. I understand wanting to believe those things when you have to kill creatures to survive. And again, I think that's coming from ultimately a place of compassion. But someone like her, like Q, who doesn't have to do that, it's not coming from a place of necessity. I think it is ultimately very selfish. She's using this as a way to continue eating animal products when she doesn't have to. We have a lot more knowledge regarding sentience, regarding animal consciousness. There is no reason whatsoever to believe that an animal is saying, yes, please shoot me in the face. This is a good thing. It's all part of balance. Come on.
And if they say I'm going to go hunt moose, the moose hears that and says, they are not worthy to have me.
Oh, okay.
They are not worthy to eat me. Yeah. And so it hides.
There are lots of beliefs out there. That is a dumb one. I'm sorry. That's dumb. Why are you using this to counter veganism? Again, wanting to be inclusive to the point of coddling and saying really stupid stuff. And also, I think, trying to excuse her own willingness to go vegan, as he said, appropriating Indigenous culture, Indigenous beliefs.
Actually, when you look at the growth rates of veganism, in America, one of the biggest demographics in terms of adopting veganism are African Americans. And so to make the claim that it's a strictly white colonialist thing doesn't hold up, especially as white vegans aren't going to Indigenous communities in Alaska and aren't trying to impose that on them. I'm here in Dallas talking to people like yourself.
Physically, but through social media, there has been a push of people saying, Inuit tribes who hunt beluga whales, which are not endangered in any way, people are saying that's wrong, you can't do that.
So I don't know if that's true or not, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't want to say because I don't know who it was, I can't remember, but someone was saying that even homeless people, need to go vegan. And certainly there are vegans who are over the top in their beliefs and have very little compassion or understanding for humans and human suffering. Several misanthropic vegans, often the very vocal ones, are misanthropic and obnoxious. You'll find that in any group, any belief system. Social justice cause, right? Typically the loudest ones are extremely obnoxious and don't represent the group on the whole. I'm sure for some of you, I'm one of those obnoxious vocal vegans. I'm sure I am, at least some of the time. We have to be able to separate the vegan from the veganism, from the ideology. You have to be able to separate the practitioners from the practice. Particularly in this case, where he has said twice now that he is not speaking to Indigenous people. He's not the one telling whoever, Inuit not to hunt beluga whales or whatever. He is speaking to people in Dallas, as he says. He is speaking to wealthy Americans who have basically unlimited access to foods, lots and lots and lots of vegan plant foods. And so for her to keep going and to keep harping on this, again, suggests that she's not really listening and she's not really interested in having a conversation with him. She's interested in just coming after veganism with this veganism is a white, anti-Indigenous thing. And I think that's really all she's interested in. And it's a shame.
I'm not going to disagree that there are certain vegans who will make that claim, but by and large, most vegans, including myself, have a more of a nuanced understanding that there are people in the world who have a different relationship based on the environment that they live in, and hence I'm not going to make the claim that people who are hunting belugas out of necessity to survive should be held to the same moral standard that you and I can with the choices that we have.
Again, very well said. And also look at her face. It's like a what an idiot kind of face, or like she doesn't believe him, or like, I don't know. It's just very, how he's able to stay so calm. I would just, how he's not, I don't know. I'm just a bitch, and I would just be laughing. Just half the stuff she said, I would just be very snarky and like I am now. So kudos to him. I wish I had that ability.
You say moral standard because you're saying that them hunting beluga is morally wrong.
No, I'm saying in a situation of necessity, it's different. Like with humans, if I said, shooting a human is morally wrong, it is. But if you have to shoot a human out of necessity, then it becomes morally justified. But by and large, the general rule should be, if we can avoid causing unnecessary harm to someone, morally speaking, we should try to pursue that option. What do you think about that?
I mean, I fully agree. Yeah. And so my question is just, why are you here asking these people why we're not vegan? What is your reason for that?
I think he's very clearly explained it. Yeah, she's not in a place to listen.
The purpose of me being here isn't with this kind of naive opinion that everyone's going to sit down, agree with me and be like, hey, Ed, I'm going to be vegan now. But it's to try and maybe ask questions and talk about topics that people maybe haven't considered, and to try and get maybe a deeper reflection on those values and ideas, because it is a moral issue, and morally we do agree with reducing suffering. It's just that we haven't always thought about the suffering that occurs for our food that we consume.
And that's something I've noticed with him. She did ask, one question, not understanding what he meant by difference in a different moral standard. But for the most part, he's the one asking questions, which is a really good idea if you are having difficult conversations with people, going up to people or going on a campus and asking people to, hey, come up and talk to me about climate change or veganism or whatever. It's often a good idea to just ask people questions. And number one, that's a good way to actually understand what people are saying, what they believe, to have a conversation, and to get people thinking about their own beliefs. Because often when it comes to matters like veganism or religion or climate change, people don't really know what they believe. They aren't really sure where their actions, where their behaviors are originating. And so just asking simple questions like, well, you say this, what does that mean? Why do you believe this? Can be very eye-opening for the person who's being asked the question. Not saying it's 100% effective or anything. There are certain people who are resistant to that kind of stuff, or get very angry, or start the conversation very angry as she has. But I think overall it's a better way to have difficult conversations with people, rather than just say, here's what I believe, here are all the facts, right? Because people really don't like when you just throw factual information at them. It's not very convincing, unfortunately. But if you can get people recognizing that they don't really have a consistent understanding of what they're promoting, or a consistent belief system, or that they actually haven't really thought about this thing that they held so strongly, I think that's a lot more useful, at least in the long run, because I think you ultimately get people thinking more about what they're doing and what they believe.
I know because I was raised in the Texas education system.
Yeah.
I'm sure many people here were.
I'm sure.
We were all taught high school, like health class or whatever, how fast food was made, and they show us like the slaughter camps and all of that of the animals and whatnot, and they try to traumatize us and whatnot, and they're like, don't eat fast food, that's why you only eat, real meat and whatever. But then they don't say that that exact same process happens for real meat.
Is that really what they do in the Texas educational system, like public schools? Anyone familiar, please leave a comment, because I went to school in Tennessee, and we definitely did not get any information about fast food being bad and that fast food is associated with slaughterhouses, but like real meat is not. That's very interesting. But she's absolutely right if that's what they're saying. Slaughterhouse meat is not just limited to fast food. The vast majority of meat people buy, if you go to the grocery store and buy meat, it is 99% likely that it is a result of factory farming. That animal suffered greatly and then was slaughtered.
You have the plant-based produce, right? You have, who is growing this plant-based produce? It's immigrants who are undocumented, who are being paid cents a day they are being exploited on their own reason. Yeah. Yes, animals are being exploited and they're being harmed, but so are humans. Yeah. And so you saying that, what's, morally, overall better to have plant-based, that's also like, it's a gray area, because you're also furthering harm on these people.
Number one, it's 99, everything is a heuristic, right? A heuristic is a useful phrase that we use that works 99% of the time. Reduce your meat consumption or stop eating meat. For most of us in this country, we can do that and we can be healthy. But obviously, there are edge cases. Eating a vegetarian diet is better for the environment. Again, 99% of the time that's going to be true, but certainly you can create a vegetarian diet that's just full of like pineapple and lots of other like water and resource intensive vegetables and whatnot that could actually be worse than an omnivorous diet. But again, most people are not doing that. Most people are not going to do that when you say, hey, stop eating meat. They're not just going to start eating pineapple and lettuce or something. So it's a useful heuristic. In the same way, saying that plant-based foods are less cruel than animal-based foods is a very useful heuristic, because 99% of the time that is absolutely true. And it's interesting that she talks about workers. This is another common thing brought up by more left-leaning people who want to denigrate veganism, or use it as an excuse not to go vegan. They will often bring up workers, people who are picking produce and whatnot, and how it's rough work and they're often not paid very well. Well, one of the worst jobs in this country is working in slaughterhouses. You talk about people who aren't paid very well and who have to deal with death on a daily basis. Just read some of the accounts from people who have done this work. It's terrible. So I find it interesting that she totally overlooks that aspect of veganism, not supporting that anymore. And it's not just slaughterhouses, also meat packaging and meat processing can be really awful, particularly during COVID times. So again, 99% of the time, eating plant-based causes far less cruelty than eating animal products. And that includes cruelty to humans as well. And also, you always have to think of the alternative. I talked about this in my sustainability video recently, talking about the Shein company, that fashion company that people will talk about, sweatshops and whatnot, and just that, well, we shouldn't support that, but there's rarely ever any mention of the alternative. And sometimes the alternative can be worse. This is what these people are doing for work. What would they be doing if they didn't have this not great job? No one's saying it's a fabulous job, but what would they be doing? And often the alternative is worse. And so I think that's something we need to consider as well whether we're talking about people working in sweatshops in China or we're talking about people working at Walmart. There are lots of people who boycott Walmart because they think that the treatment of workers is so bad. Well, again, what is the alternative? The people, the migrant workers, and everyone else who are picking our tomatoes and whatnot, what would they be doing if they weren't doing that? It's really obnoxious to me when people just use it's a gray area to ultimately have no stance or to ultimately just denigrate a position, right? They're just using that not as a way to try to understand our food system better or to try to make better choices, but again, really as an excuse. Yes, our food system, there are areas where it's really gray. I've talked about eating like invasive species before, and that maybe sometimes that could actually be an overall net positive thing. There are lots of gray areas like that I personally love talking about, but it doesn't keep me from ultimately making decisions and ultimately being vegan and trying to do the best I can. And as per usual, I can't stop talking. So this is a 2-parter. Part 2 will be up in a couple days. It'll be around the same length, about 25 minutes. Some interesting stuff about halal meat and animals not being conscious, and some very interesting stuff. So stay tuned for that.